Good morning, friends. I hope you have had a great week. So, this time I'm in a new location. I'm floating on the Ganges, the holy city of Varanasi. And well, we don't stop our weekly wraps, we continue. So, this week has been, last week we thought it was all going good, right? It was a good week. And then everything turned topsy-turvy over the weekend with the H1B plus sanctions and then the further tariffs on pharma also. So things can change so quickly. We just cannot forget what's been the pace of movement. And one day's news cannot really be relied upon to make any decisions. So while on the H1B plus, there was a fair amount of panic, as you know. And while I was reading this wonderful editorial by Tulsi Jayanti in the Mint, she pointed out that while the US administration may be trying to get more jobs in by doing this, they could actually be shooting themselves in the foot. For you see, as she points out, what they're forgetting is that the output per worker of a local hire versus an Asian hire is quite different. So the kind of productivity that the local hire would have would be vastly different and much, much lower. So actually they may not have a cost benefit. Not only do they have to pay more for the local hire, they would also get less output per man hour spent on the local hire. And also it's quite clear now that the Indian IT companies were not really so dependent on the H1B visas. And in fact, because of all this, you may find more and more offshoring and more GCCs being set up, which is actually good for us. The other headline that caught my attention was that Indian corporates have about 3.8 lakh crores parked in mutual funds. Okay. And this only reflects the fact that Indian corporates have so much cash, but they're not able to find enough opportunities to invest and create fixed assets. And that is where we are really suffering as far as the capex creation is happening. We're really hoping that as we go forward, things would change. Okay. One headline that also caught my attention was the one that Indian corporates had almost 3.8 lakh crores parked in mutual funds. It just goes to show that there's so much cash on the Indian corporate balance sheets, but they've not been really investing it in creating new fixed assets, new capacities. Capacity utilization has not been great, close to about 75%. And with all this uncertainty, entrepreneurs are really not keen on making fresh investment decisions. So it's not that this forms to be just shade below 4% of total corporate assets, but not really alarming because it has moved in the region of 3 to 4% always, with a low of 2.5% somewhere in the past. Okay, so that's one thing that we should be wondering about. Then Adrian Mowat, the economist and investor, has been pointing out that yes, we've read about de-dollarization, but here what he's been really saying is that most incremental flows into equities globally have been directed away from the US. So while they have left their existing investments more or less there, all new investments have been going to Europe and emerging markets rather than the US. It shows a lack of confidence in the American markets and also is reflective of the very high valuations and concentrated market capitalization that we see in the US markets. Earnings growth also in the US markets has been only driven by those top 10 companies, and the balance 490 have been showing a very low revenue growth. So all this is reflective of the sad state of global economy in general. We are not seeing great growth anywhere. But Chinese exports have been shooting up. And unlike perception, because of the tariffs, their exports may have problem with the US, but the last few years they've been preparing so well that their exports, they've found new export markets, and all exports have ramped up, whether it is to the ASEAN or to Africa or to Europe. And of course, India has been importing more and more from China last few years. Try as much as we can to reduce the trade balance. We've not been able to reduce the trade balance. So it just shows how well China has been preparing for this, that their exports have not been impacted. The other one that really, I wonder about is the large pipeline of IPOs that are planned. Just from the BFSI segment, about 58,000 crores of IPOs are likely to come out in the next few months. With the kind of valuations and the liquidity, the attention for IPOs, this is not going to have a great impact on the existing secondary market. You could expect a duller market because much of the incremental flows, much of the liquidity will go towards the new IPOs. And in any case, nothing is looking great. So we are going to see a very moderate sideways market as long as it doesn't come down. The rupee has been drifting lower, and of course, not too much of a concern. We've just been finding our own level. Probably the central bank thinks that it is better to let the rupee float down to its real level. Then not because of inflation differential, not because of macro issues, it's just because of flows. There have been more outflows than inflows as far as the Indian rupee goes. And this is what has caused the depreciation that has happened. Yeah, 3 to 4% everybody's prepared for. But we thought that given that inflation differentials were reducing, it should be a lower depreciation. But at the moment, it is flows that are mattering more than the macros. In one way, this depreciation is good because it makes our exports more competitive, and especially in the light of the additional tariffs that have been slapped on Indian exports, this bit of currency depreciation helps our exporters a little bit. So currency weakness is never bad. When we are an exporting nation, currency weakness is pretty good. So let's look well for that. But really, I mean, one doesn't want to speak of all these mundane things when we are in a place like Varanasi floating on the Ganges. Okay. So, the reigning deity of Varanasi, the guardian angel, is Kala Bhairava. Kala Bhairava is the protector of the city and the ruler of time. I think time can really set right any mistakes that have happened. If one comes to think about it, it could be bad markets, give it time, they recover. Give it any mistakes, give it time, you can cover up the mistake. I think time as such, just imagine, even if your wealth was compounding at only 10% per annum, just give it, 5 to 6 years, and your 10 lakhs can easily become 3.2 crores at 10%. That is the importance of allowing your wealth to compound without touching it. And over time, it multiplies so well that 10 can become 3.2 or 10 can become 320 is something generally we cannot imagine. The other thing that I would really like to talk about is when it comes to time, eventually that is a luxury that we all crave for. Possibly in the earlier parts of our life, we don't understand what the value of time is. Not just in terms of compounding, but just the availability of it. Affordability. In the early parts of our life, we think that affordability is to do with money. And we give less importance to other issues. Spending time with family, spending time with passion. We postpone it. But actually, by the time we have the money to do so, we discover we don't have the time. So really, I think what we can do is find balance in how we use our time and we use our money. Let's be very, very conscious of this. And I think that's the message I have for all of you this week. Let's value the time we have. Let's live in the present. Let's find the balance that we are looking for. Thank you. Have a great weekend.